Hello, welcome to my channel Conscious Growing, and I'm Matthias. And in today's video I want to be a little bit more personal, and I want to explain what I experienced on this journey with chronic symptoms. And as it was in my case, specifically lots of symptoms after a corona infection. So at that time, at the peak, I once counted like 25, 30 different symptoms. And as you know, if you're on the same journey, either in the beginning or in the middle of it, or maybe towards the end, however it is, I'm sure you experienced very intense periods. Despair, frustration, anger, sadness, fear. And so the personal part of this video will be my journey and all the tools I took and what worked and what didn't work. And now I understand clearer why it didn't work. And I want to talk specifically about brain retraining, which I did. But let's start from the beginning a little bit. So when I found myself back having all these symptoms, overwhelmed, trying to find a solution, went to my doctors. Nobody had a clue. It was back in 21 when we were still in the middle of this pandemic. And I experienced all these symptoms, and I understood quite quick that this is this long COVID thing. When you have this infection and when you have lasting problems energetically. And so in my case it was exhaustion. I couldn't walk anymore. I was bedridden at that time. I could hardly get up to go to the loo, and it was frightening, of course. So my whole body wasn't functioning anymore how I was used to be. And I'm a body therapist. I worked for 20 years on this with lots of passion and love for this work. And then from one day to the other, I wasn't able to do this work anymore. And that scared me so much. And as we all know in the beginning, you try to find solutions. Of course, you speak to your doctors. You check on the internet. You try to find any kind of hint that will lead you out of this situation. And the good part of it was that after a few attempts in the beginning, I realized that this is an inner job. And this is something I have to resolve almost on my own. Up to a certain degree, it was important to have some informations about how the nervous system works. And I realized that this is an nervous system issue, because I understood it's impossible that a healthy man never went to doctors the last 10 years could end up like this, like bedbound and not able to participate in life anymore. So then this journey started, and I did this brain retraining, a famous one, I don't want to mention here, but I started it and I gave all my hope in this kind of work. But because I was so sensitized in the beginning, I have to admit it was hard for me to follow all the daily tasks. And there were quite a few. So I had my morning routine, I rewired my brain, I stopped negative thoughts and exchanged them with more positive affirmations and visualizations and so on. So I was totally into it. And I was aware that this would take some time, that won't be fixed in a few days or weeks. So it might take me some months. So the recommendation was to follow the program at least for half a year and do the practices. And as keen as I always was, I decided to follow this. So I devoted all my energy and time to do this program. And I have to admit it was a real struggle at times, because at some point sometimes I felt even more overwhelmed with my sensations, emotions, capacities, symptoms such as brain fog and fatigue and so on. So my threshold at that time was easily reached, and the program itself seemed to be too much at times. The tools themselves seemed too much. But of course I heard and even communicate with other members in this program that they were getting better and that these tools worked for them. And then there were people who called themselves recovered. And that kept me going, of course. That was the fuel to not give up. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. And so, and this is a very important point, what happened then was that some symptoms left me. And I continued and more symptoms left me. I started to feel better. I started to leave the house again. I started to have my walks. I was able to do these little things in life again. Go to the supermarket, drive my car, and so on. But even though many of the symptoms just vanished with time, I still felt sensitized, and I still felt some kind of pressure within myself. So in other words, it didn't lead to the state of calmness. I didn't feel calm. And I was still very hyper aroused at that time, in fight or flight, still. And I always felt there's still something underneath that is taking all my attention and is still causing some kind of symptoms. In my case, mainly lots of adrenaline in my system that was like coming up and caused very difficult states. And even though many of these symptoms had gone, I still had lots of anxiety in me. And I tried all these TMS tools because I realized, okay, something is happening here. This system, this or in other words, some protectors in me don't feel safe. And with all this brain retraining, I didn't feel safe. With all this exposure, I still didn't feel safe. There was still this inner turmoil and this pressure, and I still felt like a pressure cooker with lots of emotions inside that seemingly wanted to find relief. And here, and this is personal, you might have experienced something else, but for me now, with more understanding, but not mainly understanding, but in the first place with personal experience, I can say in hindsight that imagine a queue, you're standing in a queue, and then you're walking through this queue, and this movement in the queue represents the brain retraining. So I did my practices, stop negative thoughts, stop negative sensations, stop and exchange them with something more positive. Yeah, this is mainly how brain retraining works. And I did it over and over and over again. So I was in this queue, moving, and for some reason it felt like I did this training, but then I was back in the queue. I was the last one in the queue again. There was this anxiety, there was this fear in me, these strong sensations. And I thought, oh my God, I do something wrong. I'm the only one who don't understand it. I'm in it for 2 years. Others say I'm recovered after half a year. And I was still in it. And I thought, my God, what are you doing? What are you doing wrong? So that's activated my brain again. And I thought, okay, I have to find something else. This method is not working for me. What's out there that fits to me? And then I came to the concept of allowance, and to the idea to be okay with everything that's there. And that's quite the opposite of brain retraining, isn't it? Because the brain retraining provides the idea, or this specific brain retraining, I can't talk about others, I can only talk about this one. But as far as I heard, they are quite similar. And there's one piece missing, and not even one piece missing, even furthermore, there is an idea that you stop this negative stuff in you, that you stop and exchange it. And I wondered why am I always coming back to the end of the queue? What am I doing wrong? And then when I entered this field of allowance, I realized there is a key, because I felt there was still so much stored in me, some old energies. And with this concept of brain retraining, I always swapped them away. And then I realized, okay, up to a certain degree, it's okay, because you don't want to end up in this despair. You don't want to get lost in your negative thoughts and so on. Of course, you have to create a mindset. But what I realized, what wasn't working, was the idea of keeping all this negative stuff away from me. Because now the point for me is, this stored stuff is so old. And it was in me, it was unprocessed emotions like anger developed in my childhood. I wasn't allowed to express it. And then sadness as well. I wasn't allowed to be sad. And is it a wonder that the stuff has to come up at a certain point in our lives? It has to. And when I realized that, when I was confronted with this concept of allowance, of course I also struggled in the beginning, because it was so new, because it was just the opposite what I had done before. Before I was like, stop. Imagine your child is crying and it wants to express some momentary emotions like anger, because it had some difficulties with a friend in the kindergarten or something like this, and it comes back home and it wants to express that there was some stress, some trouble, and it's not allowed to do it. Stop, we have to do this now. Grandma is coming in a half an hour, so be quiet, and so on. So what is this child doing? It represses this emotion told by the adult. And then this child is in this intense state, not allowed to express his emotion. And like this we go on and go on, because many moments and situations will follow. And then in the meantime we created a new habit, an unhealthy one. And this unhealthy pattern is to repress emotions. And then we go on in our adult lives and we do the same things we learned before. It wasn't safe to feel sadness. It wasn't safe to feel this anger. So what we're doing, we create strategies, but mainly we suppress it. And of course, every human being has its own way to deal with it. Some are becoming very high achievers, being busy all day, just not to feel this stuff, until it comes to the point where something is knocking from inside and is saying, look, I can't cope with this anymore. So do you see where I'm getting at? What happened was that with my brain retraining, I had some success in the beginning. Because yes, there was something that came down a little bit. Some symptoms left me. But the root problem, the root cause, wasn't solved. And when you hear root problem, you might roll with your eyes and would say, oh no, not going back to the past, and do I have to dig in the past and find the moment where it all happened, where it all started? And my clear answer, no, you don't have to. Because why should you? The problem, this suppressed energy, is happening now. It comes now. It appears now. It shows up now. And now is the time to process it. And this is just the opposite from being or trying to get rid of it, trying to find solution, trying to fix it. And this is what all of us are doing in the beginning. I think there's no one who immediately gets it and says, okay, I have to feel my repressed emotions. And even if there's someone who gets it immediately, this person still has to do the process. And, you know, it's not the same as if you have diarrhea and you go to the toilet and it all flushes out, and maybe a second time and a third time, and then after a few days, after a few toilet visits, you feel this relief, you feel better, the virus is out of your system, and you feel this relief, and you feel better, and you enjoy having a good meal again after a couple of days, and then it's gone. But here it's a little bit different. It comes in waves, and we can't force anything. But what we want to do is to become the allower of these old energies. And because they come up anyway, and when they come up, it's a sign that the time is right. And you and I had to come out of this habit trying to stop it, trying to distract myself, trying to get away from it, trying not to feel it, trying to use mental tools, trying to calm myself. When a child wants to express its intense emotions, it doesn't want to be calmed down, because that would happen in the past and it never worked. It caused the repression. And that's why now we are learning to and practicing to allow this. And what does allowing actually means? It means, like, in best case, 100% willingness to feel what's right here. And giving space to these emotions. Giving space to this unpleasant stuff. And we want to learn with time even have this awareness of our physical body, because this is some sort of a container. And when this container contracts, the old energy can't leave the system. Because, and let's take the example of fear. When strong fear builds up in the system, like anxiety, fear, a panic attack is bubbling up, whatever, the thing is, it's good that it happens, but if you block it through more tension, tension on tension, more tension. So the energies stay in the container. And this creates more tension. And these energies are like a wild hurricane in our system sometimes, creating all these symptoms. And we are kind of frightened, fearful, we don't want to feel it. But every time we don't want to feel it, and we say, stop, stop, I have a positive thought, imagine myself on the beach, and so on, it's bypassing. Sorry, guys, to say this. So you have to ask yourself, at a certain point, am I trying to bypass this old stuff in me? Or am I willing to allow them? This is the key. Because otherwise, you try to manage something, you have your tools, you have your compulsions, and you're in the queue, moving forward through and then you're back in the queue again. And then we wonder why we don't get better. And it's not a blame on anyone. We have to get there. It took me so much time to understand this. Because before I thought, I do everything. I listen to all these gurus out there, the TMS gurus. And I try to follow their advices. But it just worked to a certain degree. But then on the other hand, the main job I was avoiding, I didn't want to feel this terrible stuff. But then we have to understand it feels terrible because it's old stored energies. And we need repetition. Like the example of the diarrhea, it needs more repetition than just go to the toilet for 5, 6, 7 times until you're better, until the virus is out. We have to allow this release. But then coming back to the brain retraining programs, from my point of view, and from my experience, that there was something missing, as explained in this video. But of course you can use the brain retraining, but with a new purpose. And the new purpose is to use these tools to allow. So when you ground yourself physically, you imagine your feet on the ground, your openness to the experience and so on. This can be very helpful to allow what wants to come up. Yeah, because it's good to have an anchor in this and to create an anchor. And this might be different for people. What always worked for me and where I always came back to was the understanding that I am not this sensation. These are sensations from the past, so I didn't identify with them. I learned to observe them, I learned to allow them, I learned to let them go through my body with almost no resistance, as good as I could in the moment, as good I was able in the storm of these sensations to be as neutral as possible. So my awareness was more in this kind of presence, with this allowing attitude, and allow to do its own thing. Let the energy go, but to learn with time not to fight against it, not to contract against it. Again and again to open up and identifying with this space and container. So, in other words, where was my attention? Yes. Was it on the symptom, on the sensation, 24/7? Now this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Now, because then with this attitude, you, of course, create more hypervigilance and also more fixation on the symptoms. But the thing was to learn to be with it along my day in short durations, because this is one of the main things. Because one of the mistakes I made in the beginning was like, okay, and there was the achiever again, in my case, who was saying, okay, I understand this concept, I just have to allow, I just have to sit with it. And then I sat with it for 2 hours or 3 hours. I was sitting there like trying to be the Zen monk and saying, okay, I can handle this. I had this self-talk. I go through this. Yes, yes, yes. And I did it for too long. Because to sit with it for 3 hours, in my case, was just the other extreme from avoiding to here I am, you know. And it didn't work because because the sensations didn't get better. And I didn't realize that I was building up even more stress in me, building up more tension. And it was not allowance, it was trying to do allowance in order to get rid of the symptoms. And you see, this is a very subtle difference. And this art of allowing, this has to be practiced. And you start to practice at some point until you realize, oh my goodness, this is still resistance. I'm still resisting. So no wonder why this circle keeps going. And the more you practice, the more subtle it gets. Because when you start to practice, you realize your resistances, your avoidances, all the mechanisms that were hidden before come up now. And that's why symptoms can be even stronger at times. Because now we leave all these strategies and we go in this tendency of falling allowed it over and over again. And there's this description used often, and I also mention it. There's this window of tolerance, and we have to find our window of tolerance. This means we learn to start slowly with this process. And yeah, you might have symptoms 24/7, but there was still the symptoms, the unpleasant stuff. It was here and you were there and trying to, it's not there, or trying to distract, whatever. Now you come a little bit closer, you allow it, you let it express itself. And you identify, you repeatedly learn to identify, to be the observer, the one who allows, and not the sensation, the fear and the stuff itself, because that easily happens, this identification. And there's where people get stuck, and there's where I got stuck as well for a long time. And to be honest, this process is not finished at a certain point, because life goes on. We have stressful situations, we have argues with people, we have difficult moments with our partners sometimes. All this keeps on going. We lose people in our life, the loved ones, and this is painful. And we learn to have grief, to feel grief. So this is an ongoing process. This is not just a process to allow until all the old stuff has left us. At a certain point, this is the case. This relief of allowance, or in other words, the relief that follows after allowance, settles us down, and we are coming back to this parasympathetic state again, more and more through this practice. And of course, when we are more in this state again, we operate differently in the outer world, of course. But still, there are these peaks in life, and we can use the same principles again when it gets difficult again. That it's what it's made for. We don't want to pull back to old habits of avoidance, of not being present, numb ourselves with whatever it is for you. In the end, it's a call to come back to life, to come back to presence, to feel everything that appears. And this is what I mean. These are the limits of the work with a brain retraining program in most cases. If there's some programs out there who include this process I was just describing, wonderful. I don't know them all. I just know mine, and I know that in some others this aspect is totally missing, and that explains why you're in the queue again, on the end of the queue. Or you start on the end of the queue. And what happens in stories I heard from people that they did these brain retraining programs and they were symptom free, and they declared themselves as recovered. And then a year later, they got symptoms again. And they were, oh my goodness, what a shock, it starts again. This stuff didn't work. And you see, then you're immediately back to your head again, and then you end up in lots of despair, because imagine you think you went through it and then it comes back. But this explains what's happening in the system. It's like when there is stocked energy, you can't change it through stopping this and saying, no, it just goes somewhere else. So the brain retraining might have caused some more calmness, and the system was able to function again and operate again. But the stuff was still in there. And because it wasn't resolved, it came up again, just in other parts. In some cases, it's strong anxiety again, because it's still this stored stuff that was saying, look, I'm coming up. Here's the opportunity for us to process something, but instead you try to stop me. Instead you continue to repress me. And this worked for a while because I was calmer for a period of time. But the main thing wasn't resolved. And that's where people can be so lost. Can you imagine? Maybe you're one of them when you listen to this. And therefore, I hope that this makes lots of sense to you, why you're still experiencing this. So we have to look deeper. And as I said, we don't have to grab in the past, but the willingness to experience the stuff right and now, here, right and now, as unpleasant as it is. But this willingness and this, however you create your space and your safety in it, because I fully agree it needs some safety, and there are ways to create safety. I mentioned one or two in this video. You have to see what works for you. For me, it was this idea of space, to also to be aware of my body, that this body is a container and everything happens inside was just the old material, but I'm not the old material. I'm the one who observes. I'm the one who's aware of the space in its body, and I'm the one who allows all this stuff to happen as long as it needs. And also because I came to this example of doing it for 3 hours and that didn't work for me. And why it didn't work was, okay, I was too fixated on it. That's why I was talking about the window of tolerance. And this means practically that you allow yourself time along the day to feel it, to give space to it. Doesn't matter if you sit down or you lie down. I did it while I was lying down most of the times, allowing this stuff to come up. And in the beginning for seconds, 30 seconds maybe, and then engage with something. Do something, read, walk, do your kitchen, go for a walk. Do the things that are in front of you, but then always along the day when it bubbles up, like don't run away from it, allow it. Check in, build your window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance might be, as I said, a few seconds in the beginning, but every time you do it, you process something. Even if it still feels awful, because every time you allow it without resistance or a minimum degree of resistance, you create space, because you give the message to your anxious part of the brain, I can be with it, I can be here and you can be here too, and I'm not running away, I'm not fighting you, I'm allowing you to express whatever you want to do. Because when this energy was starting to repress, so let's come back to the beginning of the video, it wasn't allowed, and now it's allowed. So the old residues, they come out, all these little pockets in the body, we allow them to flush out. And with time, this brings relief. Sometimes when it's very intense, you can even feel very sick afterwards. And it's not this immediate result, but then sometimes a day later or later in the afternoon, you see, wow, I'm more light. And because I'm more light, I have different thoughts. So my life is not so bad as it seemed before this relief. Something settles down, and when this happens, our mindset shifts on its own. Because imagine a person in a fight or flight, or even in the free state, when you're here, and then on top of it, you should work on your mindset. Your mindset is so important. And then this anxious, overwhelmed system tries to have a good mindset. And even this can cause more struggle. But the process and the suggestion here is to learn to be this neutral allower, let everything happen, and then with time the system settles. And when the system has settled, you make the right choices. You go towards the thing you love to do. You open up for your environment. You open up for people around you. This happens naturally. We don't need to force anything. And yeah, this is key here. So I'm gonna end here for today. I hope this long video is helpful in some shape or form. And yeah, if you have any comments, please be welcome to comment and ask any questions about it, or even share your own personal experience about this subject that might help others who have listened to this video and reading in the comments and get some kind of your personal insights about it that can be very helpful, so you can give your own stuff into the world that might help others. And yeah, if this is all new to you and you watched the first time, as you might have noticed, I'm doing these videos in English and German. Most of the times German because I'm German, but I also love to do them in English from time to time, especially when I have these kind of topics like today, which are very important for me, and I feel this inner wish to share them with you because it's so important to understand this. And yes, on top of it, I also offer a one-to-one coaching, and you can use the opportunity to have a 30-minute chat with me, and this is totally free, and you find it in the description. There you find my website, and when you click this link, you have the opportunity. There's a form, and you can write a message, can talk about your personal situation, and then we can have an appointment and we can see if my understanding might take you by the hand, so to speak, and show you ways out of this. And it's a very simple path, but of course not easy to practice. And it's good to have someone who is going through this on its own or went through it on its own. So this might be a useful opportunity for you if these words speak to you and if you have the feeling, this guy might understand what he's talking about. So yes, so I'm going to stop here. Take care for now, and we talk soon. Bye.